Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the basics class. I'm Isaac, and we are my Sushi Sensei. Now, what we're going to be talking about today is we're going to start off talking about the tools and tricks of the tray. We're going to go over everything over here in front of us. Then we're going to start talking about how to prep your ingredients to get ready to have a fantastic sushi class. All right, so first things first, we're going to want to pop that bamboo mat out and get our kit all nice and set up. Make sure that we've got all of our pieces out and in place. We're going to set these off to the side so they're not getting in our way. And then we're ready to rock and roll. So the first thing that we always talk about is our bamboo mat when we're doing the basics class, because the bamboo mat is our roller and it's what we're going to be using most of the time to create our sushi. So first thing we need to do is wrap it in saran wrap. And that's actually a really important part of creating excellent sushi, is making sure that you don't have raw bamboo touching your rice. If you get those rice grains in between the bars of bamboo, what you're going to find is that that rice will actually dry and ruin the bamboo or make it extremely difficult to clean. So what we do is we take some saran wrap or plastic wrap, and we're actually going to wrap it. So what I like to do is I will draw my plastic wrap all the way to the end of my cutting board. It helps if you actually have some hanging off the edge. Then I'll take my bamboo mat and we're going to use the green side up and we'll lay it down on our cutting board. We're going to bring that extra piece of saran wrap up, and then we're going to pick our bamboo mat up, pull out some extra saran wrap, and flop it over once. Pick it up and pull. Flop it over twice, and then pick it up and pull. Flop it over a third time. Now, when you're doing this, you do want to make sure that you're being careful about how much extra that you have. In an ideal world, you just have a very little bit of extra saran wrap, just so we're not wasting it. But in this case, I've got a little bit extra, which is a-okay. We'll cut that saran wrap, so we've got that extra long piece, and then we'll fold it down over our bamboo mat. Now, when we're working with that saran wrap, what I like to do is I like to start in the middle and press all that air out. Those sides are still open, and we want to make sure that we're getting as much of that air out of our bamboo mat as possible. Then I'll take and turn my edges onto the white side as well. This will make sure that bamboo mat is nice and sealed so that we're ready to rock and roll when it comes to rolling sushi. Now, in between every single session of rolling, I always take my saran wrap off and then reapply. This will give you a clean surface to work with for every new sushi rolling session. Now, you don't want to take it off in between rolls. We want to take it off in between opportunities to roll sushi. So we're going to take that and set that off to the side. If you do find that you have a lot of air in there, what you can do is pop a little hole in your saran wrap. It'll help you press all those air bubbles out. And why that's important is because when we go to roll, we want to make sure that we don't have big air bubbles pressing and causing our sushi to move around. Next, we want to make sure that our cutting board is nice and clean and out in front of us. On our right-hand side, I always like to have my chef's knife and my rag. I like to lay that chef's knife right on top of the rag because it holds it still and it'll be off to the side. Then we'll take our water dish and place that water dish out in front of us. Now, I'm right-handed, so I like to put it on my right-hand side. Knife on the right, water dish on the right. If you're left-handed, you're more than welcome to use your left-hand side. But for our viewing purposes, I'm going to set our water dish off to the side here. Anything will work for your water dish. You don't need a rectangle. You just need enough water to be able to get your fingers into and make sure that you can dip your knife into without stabbing the edges or the bottom. Next, we're going to have our soy dish. We'll set that off to the side there. We'll be using it later. And over here on our left, I like to have our presentation plate. create your sushi here, present on the left. It's really quick and easy, and makes for an easy transition from your cutting board to your presentation plate. Now that we've got all of our pieces laid out, we're going to start talking about our prep. Now, when we're working, I always like to prep our veggies first. Veggies first because some people don't like working with fish, and if you're trying to create sushi for a lot of people, the cross-contamination is something that you need to pay attention to. So cutting your veggies first and then your fish is definitely the optimal way to go. We're going to start off with cucumber. Now, when we're talking about cucumber, we always want to utilize English cucumber, not a regular cucumber. By using an English cucumber, what you'll find is that rind is much thicker, and the rind to seed ratio is very, very high. So you've got a very large amount of rind to a very small amount of seeds. But it really depends on the cucumber and how much of that rind you actually have. So what I like to do is I'll take and I'll pare one of my ends off and then run the length of the blade all the way down the cucumber just to score that plastic. So we can pull that plastic right off. And then we'll go to peel our cucumber. Now, you always want to peel towards you, not away from you, because you have more control over your peeler as you're peeling. But those big, long pull cuts are what we're actually going to do. You can push away from you, but I don't recommend it as you really don't have that control that we're looking for. Once we've got our cucumber all nice and peeled, set these off to the side in our trash can. And then we'll go to cut our cucumber. Now, what we're looking for out of a cucumber is that we've got 4-inch sections. So using an 8-inch chef's knife is a great way to estimate how large your cucumber pieces should be. If you're using half of the knife, that's about 4 inches and about as large as we want our cucumbers to be. Why that's important is because when we go to actually place our cucumbers onto our roll, we want to make sure that they cover the entire length of the roll. We don't have cucumbers, an excessive amount of cucumbers hanging out the side, and we don't have cucumbers hanging in from the side. For me, I use my hand as a guide to give me about 4 inches for 1 and for 2. That does a pretty good job of getting us close to where we need to be. But for everybody, it's going to be a little bit different, especially with hand size. So I recommend using half of that 8-inch chef's knife to give you a rough estimate on how big your cucumbers should be. Once we've got our large sticks here, we're going to actually pare out that core. So by watching that center, we can see where the core is at of the cucumber, and we're actually just going to cut right around that. Now I'm going to do it backwards so you guys can see, but by following the core all the way down, we can get most of our core cut out and saving as much of that rind as possible. We use the rind because if you're using the core, you're going to add more water to your sushi than you absolutely have to. And we want to avoid that as much as possible because that nori is extremely dry. We want to make sure that we're keeping it that way to get nice, crisp sushi, not gummy, chewy sushi. Now, and one more time. Now, once we've got our flats of cucumber, I like to flip them all over and then start to prep. I do like to make sure that I start one and go all the way through. Don't start and stop and start and stop and start and stop. You'll find it's much more efficient to do it this way. When we're working with our cucumber, our knife technique is always going to be that exact same pull cut and then rock the blade at the bottom. So it's always big pull and then rock that blade. Being consistent is very important, especially when it goes to creating our sushi. If you've got ingredients that are all different sizes, what you're gonna find is that you'll create a void in your sushi when you go to actually roll it. If you've got a bunch of ingredients on one side and very few ingredients on the other, it will create that void on the lean side that'll actually allow your ingredients to fall around. As you get better at it, you can go faster and faster, but when you first get started, I highly recommend taking it nice and slow, getting it as consistent as you can, and making sure your pieces come out crisp, clean, and beautiful. Once we've got our cucumbers set up, I like to slide underneath with my knife and transfer to my veggie plate. Do make sure that you have a separate vegetable plate. By having those set on their own, you can make sure that there's no cross-contamination between your protein and your vegetables. Cucumbers are done. We're gonna move on to avocado. Now, avocados are a little bit of a trick, and making sure that you have a ripe avocado is very important. So, our trick for utilizing avocados and making sure that you've got a ripe avocado is by checking the bottom. Lots of people like to pull that stem off and say, oh, that's green, it's good to go, which is sometimes right, but not always the case. What I like to do is I'll feel the bottom of the avocado, and what we're feeling for is a little bit of give. This way you can test the avocados without damaging them and make sure that if they are too hard, you can set them back and leave them undamaged. And if they're too soft, you'll know immediately because your finger will just press right into your avocado. We leave those ones. When we're working with our avocado, I recommend that you set it down, set your knife sideways, cut through to the pit, and then rotate your avocado all the way around. This way, you can keep a nice consistent level to make sure that we've got a nice consistent cut and that our avocado comes right apart. When we're prepping our avocado for sushi, lots of people like to try and cut the avocado in their palm using the skin as a backboard to protect their hands. I don't recommend this because oftentimes people will press too hard and it'll punch right through that avocado skin into their palm. There's actually an insurance term for this now. It's called avocado palm. Go figure. But we're going to take those ends. We're going to pare them right off. This is the avocado trick, by the way. My Sushi Sensei secret. Once we've got our ends pared off, we're going to save those for later. Those are our sushi snacks. Right in there. Slam dunk. Then we're going to grab the far side of that avocado and we're going to peel the skin right back. If we picked a good avocado, we should have a nice clean peel every single time. Now, making sure that the bottom of the avocado feels good doesn't always give you the perfectly ripe avocado. Obviously, this one's got a little bit of war wounds on it from bumping and grinding with all of the other avocados in the bin, but for the most part, this is a pretty good avocado. When we're working with avocados, I like to make sure that I'm getting those nice, even, consistent cuts. Now, if you're pressing down and your avocado's catching on your knife, instead of having to press it off of your knife every single time, what you can do is take your knife and lift it up, and you'll use the tip of the knife to gently pull through the avocado, leaving them nice in place and giving us those great cuts that we're looking for. This way you can fan your avocado out and give it that nice, beautiful presentation like we like to see. When you're done, you'll scoop your avocado onto your knife and then set it down on your veggie plate. Again, you'll see me constantly cleaning my knife, and if you've ever taken one of our experiences before, what you'll hear me say time and time again is clean knife, happy life. The cleaner your knife is, the happier your life will be, because it only takes a single grain of rice or a bit of food on that knife to catch and to tear your cuts. So make sure that we're keeping our station clean, make sure we're keeping our hands clean, and make sure we're keeping our knife clean. All right, next are green onions. Now, green onions usually come wrapped in these little rubber bands, which most people take off, but I actually like to leave them on. Why that is because it'll hold our green onions together and allow me to get a nice even cut without having to contain all the green onions at the same time. So to get started, I like to pare off the first little bit of green onions so we can get them all on the same level. Ooh, those are smelling good already. And then when we go to cut our green onions, rather than big sawing motions, what I like to do is I'll take my knife and just slide it right forward. And doing that slide forward motion, you can get very, very consistent green onions and run very little risk of endangering your fingers as you're working. Now, when we get down to your bamboo or your rubber band, I like to slide it back down a couple of inches and then start again. This way, it'll keep all of those green onions contained as we're going to work with them. Again, as we're getting started, make sure that you're being very consistent and very conscious of where your fingers are at when we're going to cut. Now, once we've got those set, again, I like to use my knife as a scoop so I can place them onto our cutting board. If that makes you uncomfortable, you can also use the back of the blade, which will help you scoop everything up and then put it onto your veggie plate. Our final ingredient is our carrots. Now, carrots aren't a very commonly used element in sushi because of how hard they are. Now, I really like them, especially big carrots like this one, because of the sweetness that they add, especially when it comes to pairing with ahi, which we're gonna do in our next video. But what I recommend is first peeling that carrot. Make sure we get all of the outside of our carrot off. What that's going to do is it's going to make our cuts of carrot very, very consistent, and we're not going to need to worry as much about those indentations, the bumps and bruises, and the imperfections in the outside of the carrot. Now, before you try and cut your carrot, what I like to do is, now you'll notice as soon as you've got your hands on it, that carrot is extremely slick, and using our peeler, we're going to be using next, is quite difficult to hold. So what I'll do is I'll take and I'll create a small notch on both ends, both top sides of the carrot. And what that does is it gives me a little notch to hold on to as we're going to peel our next carrot. Now, this is a specific type of peeler called a julienne peeler, and it creates perfect, beautiful julienne strings of carrot every single time. If you don't have one, you can definitely do this with your knife, but if you have the opportunity to pick one up, they're very cheap. You can get them on Facebook, or not Facebook, but Walmart, Amazon, and at most grocery stores. But it'll make your life so much easier when it comes to creating sushi for carrot, or carrot for sushi. So we want those big, long cuts of rice, or carrots. I'll only ever do 2 pulls on each side of the carrot, just to make sure that we're not getting to that core, and then we're getting as consistent of a product as possible. Now, again, we want about 4 inches of our carrots. Carrots are a little bit more difficult to measure, but if you guesstimate, chances are you're probably pretty close. And it's better if it's a little bit long than it is too short. So I'll square up our carrots, give us that nice, beautiful presentation. And we'll scoop those carrots and drop them right onto our veggie plate. All right. And with that, we've got all of our veggie prep done. Now, the last thing to prep before we dive into our sushi is our nori. And I leave nori for last intentionally because nori is extremely dry and you want to keep it that way. So the longer it is exposed to air and exposed to moisture, the faster it's going to degrade. So we want to make sure that we keep our nori closed until we're absolutely ready to use it. Now, I've got one all set up for us. But our nori is going to come in big sheets like this. This is sushi rolling nori. You can get it at most grocery stores, but I highly recommend getting the Gimme brand nori. I've had a fantastic experience with it every single time I've had it. They don't endorse this in any way, shape, or form, but I've found that other noris, when you're buying nori, if you get the cheap nori, it tastes like cheap nori. And it's oftentimes very briny or oceany. We want to avoid that. We're working with our nori. Again, they come in these big sheets, but we're going to be rolling with half sheets, not full sheets of nori. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a couple of them. I like to take 4 or 5 sheets of nori, and we'll fold it right in half and then pinch along that edge. But you'll notice that there are big, long lines in our nori, and that actually comes from the baking process, but it gives us perfect sheets of nori every single time just by folding in half and following those lines. Now, if you go to fold your nori and you don't hear that nice crisp crunch, you've got a problem, and you might need some different nori, because it'll probably be too moist and it will create very chewy or stringy nori. Now you're going to pop those apart and you'll have 2 perfect sets of nori. And we will utilize those later. Make sure you set those off to the side and make sure that they are somewhere that is not going to get wet. Setting them right next to your water bowl is a terrible idea, because when you go to get your hands wet and then bring it over the top of our nori, more often than not, you're going to drip little drops of water onto the nori, and that's going to cause it to go bad much, much faster. Getting the whole sheet of nori wet is not optimal, but better than getting a single spot of your nori wet. Because by getting that single spot wet, what you're going to find is that it compromises the composition of the nori, and with the rest of it dry and one spot wet, it tends to tear at that one spot, and it'll tear your whole sheet of nori more often than not. All right, this is the basics on how to get everything moving. Fantastic. Thank you guys for watching, and we're going to dive into our next style of sushi, which is our advanced class. So make sure you stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next one.